All right. Hello, dear unknown friends, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Ioannis. If there are those of you who are just now joining, feel like I can't quite enunciate. For those who are just joining, if this is your first time, welcome. If this is your return, welcome back. And I'm happy that you are all here, one way or the other. Let's see. David Wilson chiming in early in the chat saying, hi, how are you? Well, I'm doing pretty good. Really, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things happening behind the scenes here. Yeah, things, very, very fascinating, but fruitful, very fruitful things. I feel like I am being blessed right now. Additionally to that, my wife and I are trying to make our last preparations for her green card interview. We'll be traveling out of town this coming Friday to be interviewed by USCIS, and hopefully at the end of it, she will have her green card and and her authorization to work, which she's been so graciously patient, though it has been a struggle for her at times. But I reassured her that it is better to do things the way that they should be done. And her anxiety hopefully will soon come to an end once we step out. So yeah, things are going really well. Things are shaping up to be providential over here. Yeah, there are other things that I can't quite get into just because it's of a more personal nature. One thing that I will share is that this past Saturday was my newborn baby niece's baptism into the Catholic Church, which has been a great joy for me, and I'm sure a joy for my parents. And the other half of my niece's family is not Catholic, but I am happy to see that my brother is stepping up to the plate and being the good Catholic father he knows he needs to be. And the in-laws, my sister-in-law's parents actually found the whole ceremony beautiful. My brother-in-law actually was he was surprised that there was an exorcism included with the baptism. So he wasn't put off by it. He just thought it was kind of neat. So, oh, it was so nice, and I, of course, have been designated through Providence. I've been designated the official photographer uncle. So, in fact, before the stream, I was working on editing some of the photos, and I'm really excited to share those with my family, with my in-laws, and I hope that they like them. So, oh, and in case anyone is wondering, the baptism was in the traditional rite, and we have the benefit of living close enough that we are able to attend as a family the Society of St. Pius X at their seminary in the United States. It's been a big blessing. My family has been going there since they laid the cornerstone. I was there myself to see the cornerstone laid at the seminary in 2013, Easter Sunday. And it was also the blessing of the bells, the church bells. And it was a really interesting experience, something that occurred. So as we were approaching the beginning of Mass, the first thing that was done was the blessing of the cornerstone and then the blessing of the bells. And for those who do not know, church bells and any bells that have been blessed, even ones for private use, when they are tolled, when they're rung, the blessing confers sort of like a charism for the bells that when they resound, they repel evil spirits. And we were under threat of thunderstorm all morning in anticipation. So after they blessed the bells, they rang the bells at the start of Mass. As we were approaching the beginning of Mass, we could hear the thunder. We could see the clouds forming, and the wind was picking up. The bells rang, and it's like the thunderstorms just disappeared. They disappeared. So I'm not able to attribute it to anything other than the charism given to the bells at their blessing to repel evil, to repel the demons of the air. And so I would just, for those who have hangups about the SSPX, I would just point to that and say, if the Lord wasn't with them, then I doubt that the blessing would have had any effect. It's just my personal certainty. Now, back to the baptism. At the end of the baptism, and at the end of the baptism, my brother is handed the candle, baptismal candle, and the priest offers them an opportunity, asking them if they would like to consecrate my niece to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Now, this is a blessing that this is something that's been offered to myself and all of my siblings at our baptisms. And according to the testimony of my parents, it never failed that upon approaching a statue of Our Lady and the priest giving the blessing, we would be like crying. We would be red-faced crying. That sort of that trembling wail of a cry that little babies get, especially given that we just had a bunch of water poured over our heads. So, as it happened, according to my parents, for each of my siblings and myself, when the priest concludes the blessing and lays their hand on our head, we always finished. We would always suddenly stop crying. So it was something that I had in the back of my mind to be watchful for, not expectant for, but to be watchful for. And when my brother and sister-in-law decided that they would go and dedicate my niece to the Immaculate Heart, she was still crying. They get up there, they say the prayers, the priest confers the blessing, and as soon as his hand touches her head, she goes absolutely silent. And I looked at my dad, my dad looked at me, and we kind of had that sort of like, yeah, it's real, isn't it? that sort of look, that like inside baseball look that people give each other when they know what's up. So that was a tremendous blessing, and it seems to indicate to me, given the frequency and the consistency with which this occurs for my family, that in some special way, the Blessed Virgin, her mantle seems to be over my family in some way, shape, or form. Even before we're dedicated to her. So I find that very interesting. And I would say I'd attribute some of that to one of my great uncles. He spent his whole adult life making rosaries out of Job's tears, and he would hand link them and everything. He would grow them, harvest them, polish them, drill them, and he would make the chain links and everything for them. And he'd go around and he would sell them at craft shows and local fairs and local farmer markets and everything. But then he got to a point where he wasn't able to do it anymore, and so he gave it to my mother, like everything that he had. All of the harvested Job's tears he's ever had, all of the tools, all the drill bits, everything that he used to keep to make these rosaries, he gave to my mother, and so she sort of took it up. And I remember helping her make some of the rosaries and chaplets from them. So I suspect in some way that through his prayers for everyone in the family, and then in his passing on this tradition of making rosaries to my mother, I feel that it's all sort of a signification, some evidence towards a personal certainty that the Blessed Virgin's mantle has been over my family for a very, very long time. And so it only seems natural that I would come around to the idea of consecrating myself, which I did I did the Montfurtian consecration in 2017, and yeah, there's a lot there, a lot of things there that I don't think are appropriate to share publicly right now, but suffice to say, there was a very concerted effort from the ranks of the Inferno to try to prevent me from living out my consecration. And I guess I'll just leave it at that and let you all kind of draw your own conclusions. So these are all things that have been on my mind, which don't necessarily the only way in which they tie into what we're talking about today is because I'm, like I mentioned last stream, I'm slowly working through Juniper Carroll's compendium of Mariological essays. It's across 3 volumes. This is volume 2. I finally bit the bullet and read the first of some of the largest chapters, which inspired last week's live stream. Today, I hope that the thumbnail was. Um, I I chose the thumbnail for a very specific reason. And the subject, because it's something that's been it's another thing that's been on my mind. I've been working through last summer's issue of New Polity magazine. They did a big double issue about artificial intelligence, so I've been slowly working through the essays in there. Really fantastic, just a fantastic issue of that magazine. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I do find that the majority of the time that their essays and articles are very, very good, really quite good, and I am sympathetic to much of what they do, even though I may not agree with them on everything, and nor do I necessarily, nor would I say am I particularly happy with their occasional over reliance on post Vatican II source material for citation. It would be really nice to maybe have once in a while, I don't know, maybe some preconciliar sources a little further back than Pius XII. You know, if we can maybe go back a little further, that'd be nice. But overall, I think they're doing really important work. So yeah, I've been reading their essays from their summer issue last year on artificial intelligence. And I've spoken about artificial intelligence a few times on here. And I was reading an essay in this second volume of Mariology when I was brought face to face with something that has occasionally reared its ugly head at me throughout the course of all the reading, research, prayer, and meditation that I do about all of these subjects we discuss here on the channel. And I figured this was a slightly new perspective that I was graced with having that I think is worth discussing. And I think it's an aspect that has not yet been talked about. At least I haven't come across anything anywhere where it has been sufficiently spoken of, articulated, or explored in any way. So I figured we would, in a fairly casual way, explore the subject of robotic theology. But before we do that, I wanted to go ahead and do housekeeping that I like to do. First up, I would like to say that we're almost at 900 subscribers. Currently, I think last I looked, we're sitting at 886, and this is I'm very thankful for everyone who has subscribed so far. I have noticed that the percentage of returning viewers does seem to be overtaking the number of new viewers who are unsubscribed. Like, there's a little analytic that shows you the ratio between how many viewers are new and unsubscribed and how many are subscribed. And it's evened out over the last few weeks, and it's starting to tip more towards subscribers coming back more and more, which I really appreciate. even if all of you don't interact in the comment section, I guess I want to say you're all welcome to leave any comments in the comment section whenever you, if ever you come back and review sections of the live streams or watch any of my previous videos. It's open, and I try to make sure I respond to every comment. If it's a comment that that's open and warrants a response. Not all comments necessarily need a response. Some of them are just really nice comments to have, and they speak for themselves and aren't really opened to a question, or don't often present a question. Sometimes it's just someone stating something, and I appreciate. I'll at least like it, even if I don't write out an entire reply. But yes, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments of any of my videos and live streams that we've had. But yeah, so we're almost at 900 subscribers, and in a few streams ago, I mentioned that I would be willing and happy to do an AMA if we ever got to 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to have an AMA, like a pure AMA, where I don't have any preconceived subject ready to go, if you would like to have a true AMA, and I mean, if you want to ask me anything, you can ask me anything. We can do that if we hit 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to see that, please, if you're not subscribed already, please do subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so that you know when the next episode goes live. Also, before we begin, I also want to do the other standard plugging. First and foremost, for those who are interested in helping to support the channel and all the other content that I make, because it's not just here on YouTube, I'm also on Substack. Please consider hitting me up at Buy Me a Coffee. You can think of it as my tip jar. If you like what I do, and if you have the means to chip in a few bucks here and there, 50 cents here, a buck 50 there, every so often, or what have you, the tips jar is available at buymeacoffee.com/ignotus. That's one word. It's all one word. Buymeacoffee.com/ignotus. The link will be in the description. In addition to that, other ways that you can support me is over on Substack. Oh, there I go again. I forgot to. There we go. I really need to make sure I fix that. I don't know why it defaults to not being connected to anything. But anyhow, yeah, you can support me also over at Substack. So this is the Suffragist. You see right there pinned on the home screen is the latest in the Wondrous Works of Wisdom essay series, part 2, on praxis, reception, and seizure, sort of diving into questions about what are, after expounding on the 3 categories of Tomberg's sacred magic, and the characteristics of all 3, we kind of dive into the 2 modes that they all operate in, and ask the question whether one of them if one of the categories in particular is able or is capable of operating in both modes of either reception and seizure, when usually it operates in the mode of seizure. But if you want to know more about that, I have the link to this particular essay in the show notes below, or in the description below. So here at the Suffragist, this is just a place where I try to collate, compile all the various ideas, that I've spoken about in across all my videos, and I'm slowly working through all of that and trying to distill them down into pieces that you can read. And the ways that you can support, to further support, aside from subscribing here to the YouTube, you can also support me here at Substack. You can subscribe for free. Subscribing for free lets you read it lets you read all the essays. So, so like if you prefer printing off your Substack articles, which is something that I like to do, you can do that, and that way you have like this growing print off version. But I have ideas, some ideas that I'd like to do, that I'd like to bring to fruition, that I can add to the next tier of support, which is a paid monthly or annual subscription to the Theological. It's $7 a month, monthly, and then I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's $50 annually. So if you do it annually, you get somewhat of a discount. But what the paid tier does is it gives you access to audio versions of all the essays. And what's really nice about this is it is not some AI voice bot that is reading or narrating the essays. It is myself. Last week was a busy week, as much as I wanted to get some stuff recorded and up, but have not been able to. I believe once I can get through this week, I should be able to get on the ball at uploading all of the other narrations of all of the other pieces currently on the Substack. It's at some point it won't be financially feasible for me to continue to acquire myself the material from which I draw all of this content. And with the economy the way it is, anything that anyone is able to send our way, and by our I mean myself and my wife's way, would be very helpful. Another way that you can support is by joining the Societas Sophiergica. This is the founders tier. For $150 a year, you maintain access to the audio versions of everything, but with the added benefit of being able to do an AMA, basically, with me in a more personal manner. Physical hand or typewritten correspondence about any of the subjects that we talk about. And if you're looking for an excuse to write to someone that you want to have deeper conversation with, that you can't have anywhere else, this is a good way to do it, and it's also a way to bring a tremendous amount of support, to be a true patron of the Sophiergist, of the Substack, of the YouTube channel, to help ensure that I'm able to continue to do this. So those are all the ways that you can support. Another thing to say about the founders tier, I've got a dusty typewriter that I would love to have an excuse to dust it off so that I can write to all of y'all. Some things that I'm going to attempt to do to try to eventually increase the value, not the price, the value of paid tier, is I do have this idea of eventually having sort of a zine edition of the longer essays, or to maybe do like an annual edition of all of the year's essays. So like all the essays of 2026 in a single volume, and then all of the essays of 2027 in a single volume. I'm considering that as another way to provide more value for those who would want to support me with the monthly or annual paid subscriptions over at Substack. For those of you who've never been over to my Buy Me a Coffee, this is what it looks like. Apparently you can make posts. I tried doing that. It got 49 views, apparently, but I don't think that this is necessarily the place to really be consistent. Like, I don't think Buy Me a Coffee is a place to be consistent with the content, especially being already kind of established on YouTube and now on Substack. But nevertheless, this is the place where you can go, where if you want to just kind of, if you don't want to do a monthly, if you don't want to do an annual subscription, you can just go here and you can put like 25 cents if you feel like it into the tip jar. Just think of it as a tip jar. But this is what it looks like. That way there's that way if you go searching online, you know that you're looking at the right place. All right. So I think that's it for the housekeeping. I'm sorry that it is, sorry that this was boring. Let's see. Basil, what is it? Basilius Basil. Do I have that right? Let's see, what is this? This is, well, I'm not sure what you mean by what is this. This is a channel dedicated to, well, this is basically like a video journal channel. It's a place for me to, get my ideas down somewhere. Because as much as I used to keep journals, like from the time I was 13, I used to keep a journal that I would write in every day, multiple times a day. And so I used to be a very avid writer in my personal journals, but at some point, working in healthcare, it makes it a little more difficult with my time constraints to sit down and dedicate as much time as I would like to writing out every tot and tittle that comes into my head about all the various subjects. So this channel, aside from being sort of a video journal place to get my ideas down, its focus is on what I call Theology. Another way to refer to it is to call it Catholic cunning work. And so the goal of myself personally is to aspire to achieve whatever it means to be a Catholic cunning man, sort of like this idea of someone who has the faith of a mustard seed, that believes that the miraculous still exists, and studies, meditates, and prays for the aptitude with which to hopefully bring about healing for other people, either in anywhere from the level of like natural medicine all the way up to, by God's grace, that someday someone's shadow passing over someone and healing a person, such as Peter's shadow did, or going up to someone like Aeneas from the Book of Acts and saying, like Peter, Aeneas, Jesus Christ heals you, take up your pallet and walk. That's kind of the focus of the video journal, is on the holistic thaumaturgist. What would it mean to be a holistic thaumaturgist who is a member of the Catholic Church? I think it's pretty cool that it came up in your random recommends, and I'm glad that you found it. I'm glad you found the channel, and I hope that if not this stream, the other streams and other videos of the past may be of interest for your perusal. Um, and if you end up enjoying or finding any good fruit from my videos or this stream, I hope you consider a subscription. So thank you for joining. Always nice to see. Always nice having new people come across what we try to do here. So I think we're good with the housekeeping, and we can move on to today's subject now. So let's start with the passage that has inspired this stream. So just as a reminder, this is volume 2 of Juniper Carroll's Mariology. It's a compendium of various essays by various theologians that were commissioned to write a piece for this compendium after the declaration and definition of the dogma of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This second volume was originally published in 1957, so just a few years before the advent of the Second Vatican Council. And I must admit, so many of these authors are people that I'm not familiar with, only because I'm not a theologian. Like I'm not strictly a theologian, and I would never claim to be. But with all that being said, these 3 volumes of Mariology do have a nihil obstat and an imprimatur. So it's everything that is contained within these is perfectly it's worthy of reference for the Catholic. And there's been a lot of fruit so far from reading this, and so so what is Mariology? Well, Mariology is basically the theology of Mary. All that is theological that pertains to Mary and her relationship to our Lord Jesus Christ, all that pertains to her participation in our salvation, our redemption, and everything that pertains to her concerning God. So yeah, it's not a branch of theology. It's a niche within theology, and I think that it is efficacious, even just as I do believe that theology is efficacious, even though my thumbnail suggests otherwise. The thumbnail may suggest the opposite. It's just with the thumbnail, you have to try to communicate the thrust of something in a glance. So don't take it at 100% face value, nor take the title of the live stream. It also has to communicate the main thrust in only 100 characters. So, so yeah, the essay in question was an essay concerning the predestination of Our Lady, and it kind of it starts off with this rather basic sort of survey and overview of what do we mean by predestination in the Catholic Church. Oh, let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So it's like right off in the beginning. I'll just kind of read a little bit here. So this is an essay, again, titled The Predestination of Our Blessed Lady by John F. Bonifoy of the Order of Friars Minor. And he has an STD. No, he doesn't have gonorrhea or anything like that. He has his degree in theology. It's a rather unfortunate acronym. And so he says here, quote, the predestination of the Blessed Virgin raises problems which are common to all predestinations. For instance, how it is that Mary's predestination is infallible without infringing on her human liberty, etc. We have no intention of touching on such problems here. Our purpose is not so pretentious. We shall merely attempt to determine Mary's place in the order of divine predestinations, or to put it differently, her place in the divine plan of creation. Yet even this limited aspect of the question is not without its serious complexities. Let's see. So like right around that first sentence, he's referring that there's problems with predestinations, or like there are problems which are common to all predestinations, and I think it's elsewhere. He has a section here where he talks about yeah, here we go. All right. So we'll from the first section of the essay, quote, thinkers who make synthesis their chief preoccupation are rarely found. Still more rare are those who have been able to present a plan of creation which satisfies all the exigencies of revelation and of reason. It is an undeniable fact that the graveyard of theological essays on the divine plan of the universe is very large, and of those systems which are still in vogue, none have been able to rally a unanimous consent of shortcomings, or sorry, none have been able to rally a unanimous consent of theologians. The reason is simply this, that they all contain flaws and shortcomings which only the prejudices of the different schools of thought have been able to hide from their followers. Then a little later on, he says, he kind of goes through a quick survey of all the different ones, many of which are attributed to saints. So, he lists St. Augustine, St. Anselm, St. Gregory, St. Isidore, Peter Lombard, St. Bonaventure, St. Thomas Aquinas, so on and so forth. There's a brief mention of the Greek fathers, of Origen, and others. And then he says, however, brief mention must be made presently of the representatives of the Thomistic system, of the Scotistic system, and of the various theories which we shall designate as middle course opinions. And it was when I read that passage, it suddenly became very clear to me that this author, this writer, this theologian, he sits there and he admits that there is a graveyard of essays, treatises, dissertations, texts that have all sought to amply explain or to treat or to surmise with faith and reason the divine plan, predestination, God's omnipotence, God's omniscience, specifically. And And you would think that he would have the wherewithal to say that maybe he's literally about to offer another corpse for the graveyard. It's quite interesting. Like, a little earlier he talks about how, oh, it would just be pretentious. It would be just pretentious to try to offer an exegesis that's theologically sound concerning the question of predestination, the way the Catholic Church understands predestination. It would be pretentious, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, even though I've just literally told you that there's an entire trash heap of similar essays. It's like, I'm not going to, like, I'm warning you all, but I won't heed my own warning. And so he proceeds to go through, and he gives a survey of the Thomistic system of related to Mary's, related to predestination generally, and then applies it to Our Lady. And then he goes through the Scotistic system, so John Duns Scotus. And then he gives his middle course. And then he talks about the order of predestinations and all the various, what councils have said, and having to take into consideration the predestination of Christ. Is it willed for his own sake, or is there? He just goes through this semantic exercise that, while it is lovely to see that he at least attempts to use it in order to uphold Mary's title of co-redemptrix, there's just so much in this one essay that it was very difficult. It was very difficult to read it after the first two sections. And what I mean by that is, it was so, like, if you're not even going to heed your own warning, why even bother listening to you? Like, if you're going to sit there and say that it's pretentious for us to even to approach this subject, that it would be pretentious to try to elucidate every last inkling, every last notion on the question of predestination. And it's just, it just boggles my mind how you would persist. You think this about this subject, and you just persist in doing it by trying to make a synthesis between two seemingly opposed systems and formulae. And it all just sounds robotic. Hence the thumbnail. It's like, I read this particular essay sounded, even though it was written even though it was written a long time ago, it sounds similar to some of the stuff that I've come across in the few times um, that I've experimented with artificial intelligence. Yeah, the essay came off as very sycophantic. Like, oh yeah, well, we really shouldn't be doing this, but we're going to do it. It is, but I'm belaboring the point too much. This is not to say that the compendium itself is not worth your time. It is. It's just notable to me that at least with the question of predestination, that they chose someone who didn't seem to think that it was worthwhile. So he's just like, yeah, okay, well, we'll just throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. But thankfully, there was in an earlier. Actually, it'd be a little easier if I go to Substack, actually, because I actually I recently shared shared the passage. Okay, so there's another essay by John F. Is it also by John F. Bonnefoy? Oh yeah, it is. It's the same essay, actually. Let's see, did I? Yes, here we go. Here we go. Oh, good. I'm so glad that I did that. All right. See, this is if you use Substack, like if you have your own Substack and you use it, there's a reason why it's called notes, like as opposed to a tweet or a post. Like there's a difference between a post and a note. And one of the things that I don't know how many people realize, like there's a reason it's called notes. It's a place where you write your notes that you're going to go back to and comb over. Like the notes section of Substack should be treated like a commonplace book. And I don't know how many people are doing that. So I try to. Sometimes I use it more as like the news feed that you get on Twitter, but there are instances where I will use it and kind of offer some of my own thoughts on a passage. And so this was one such example. And it was this example that kind of became the impetus for this entire live stream. So from the same essay by Bonnefoy, quote, through a regrettable spirit of exaggeration, some of St. Thomas's disciples, less than 100 years after his death, reached the point where they falsified this tradition, the tradition of Thomism. I have already stated that by proclaiming theology a science properly so called in the Aristotelian sense of the word, they affirmed willy-nilly that the theologian can and must demonstrate in the strictest sense of the word authentic mysteries, exactly as the geometer demonstrates his theorems, namely by beginning with rational self-evident principles and arriving at necessary conclusions. There would be, consequently, no more mysteries in the Christian religion. End quote. And that's the rub, isn't it? That's the rub. The impulse, the spirit that now underlies theology is one that is like it's mechanical. It's almost mechanical. Uh, it's it's an overemphasis on rationality to the expenditure of encounter with mystery. And this is where this is where we come to a place in a historical place in the history of the church where I don't think ever before have we had this level of gosh, it's hard to find a term, it's hard to find a word that concisely expresses it. So I'll use something that is familiar to me, which is medical terminology. For those who do not know, I daylight as a nurse that works in geriatrics. So I work exclusively with the elderly, whether they are long-term care, short-term care. So I'm surrounded by all kinds of debilitating chronic diseases, all the very common ones that are associated with the elderly. So I have this lexicon of medical terminology in the back of my head that is easily accessible to me. And so one of the ways that I've sought to describe this mechanistic anti-mystery impulse, I refer to it in a few different ways. The first way is the hyper-rationalism. The idea being that there is a moderate mean, like there is a moderate mean to all things, moderation in all things, which is an exercise of temperance and prudence. And so there is a prudent and temperate rationality, a temperate and prudent rationalism that one needs to have in order to practice theology, or any other science. Then you have from the golden mean the two extremes. You have hypo and hyper. Just like in healthcare, you have the textbook normal range. We call it within normal limits. So the normal limits, which are usually in this case agreed upon by consensus of researchers across many decades, and so on and so forth. Usually, like Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, they establish what those textbook normal ranges are. But aside from that, it does follow an underlying principle that takes into consideration prudence and temperance. But you have the normal blood pressure, and then you have an abnormal low blood pressure and an abnormal high blood pressure. So by just using this mean, the hyper and the hypo analogy and spectrum to apply here to the issue that we face right now in theology, the Catholic Church, especially on the internet, is we have a hyper-rationalism. We have hyper-Thomism. We have a hyper-scholasticism. gosh, what else have I referred to it as? So, like hyper-Thomism is you could say it's a school of Catholic theology, um, hell-bent on formulating every aspect of the faith until no mystery is left. Faith by reason, can also call it, and it's like it's almost like a form. It's not exactly materialism, but you could say that it exhibits similar symptoms to materialism. Um, and in a lot of ways, um, and in a lot of ways, this whatever is animating this, to it's leading to all theologians, contemporary theologians, whether they be armchair theologians on the internet or actual theologians in universities, um, they all seem to be suffering under the influence of egregores of the exaggerated form of what is true Thomism, prudent Thomism, temperate Thomism. In fact, I remember coming across a post by somebody on Substack where they kind of lay out all of the objections against Thomism, and just the way that it was written, it seemed to imply that what they were in opposition against was a spirit that was totally against any kind of theology. Let's see. Don't. I'm not. I just want it to be known. I'm not ignoring the chat. I will get to it here shortly. So yeah, so there's this spirit, this impetus that seems to have infected church theology. It's especially noticeable online. It's mixed with other no good spirits present in academia, because it's been a long established critique of academia for the last 10 years or so, that academia just seems to be this like self-referential circle jerk, where it's all just it's become like its own industry, where everyone is just citing each other and going around in circles for the peers. Like it's all out of respect for peers, for human respect, in order to obtain goals that aren't necessarily grounded in arriving actually at the truth, but grounded in trying to get enough word count under the belt that has made enough of a meaningful impact within academia, not outside of it, but within academia, in order to climb the ladder, to increase the one's academic social capital. And we're starting to see this similar type of impulse being acted out, especially on the internet, between normie Catholics and or modernists and traditional Catholics. You also see it between Catholics and Orthodox. But for example, Um, like I see it a lot. I see it quite often between the likes of like Timothy Gordon and Jay Dyer, Catholicism and Orthodoxy, two hyper-rationalist guys, um, who I'm sure both would object and say, no, we care about preserving mystery. Uh, but their conduct and their content suggests otherwise. Um, it's and you see it with a lot of the with other anonymous users on the internet, whether it be on Twitter or Substack, Facebook. I will admit, in the past, I've succumbed to this hyper Thomistic, hyper scholastic spirit a long time ago, and um, and now now I have a much different perspective. Thanks be to God that I've gained through grace, and and I pray that everyone that's fallen into these impulses, that they too will also be given the grace to see that they're just spinning around in circles and they're not getting anywhere. So we'll go ahead and we'll take a look at chat real quick. Basilius Basil says, is the endeavor still worth it? I know the scientific community often does the same, embark on doomed endeavors to more fully understand reality. Is the endeavor still worth it is a good question. The question is, what is the goal of the endeavor? What's the point? What is the point of the endeavor? If the point of the endeavor is just knowledge for knowledge's sake, understanding for understanding's sake alone, what good is it? Modern science has a lot to say, a lot it claims to understand, and it holds it over everyone's heads as if it's dogma. Even though the method that they claim is the scientific method they claim is dogma as well. It's funny because like the scientific method actually would actually hold all of their claims to be persistently in suspicion, because it's a method of inquiry. Now, this is juxtapose this to what is the goal of being Catholic? What's the goal? What is our goal to follow Christ? Like, what's the end goal of that? Following Christ, our sanctification, our salvation. Receiving the gift to be counted among the communion of saints and to behold the beatific vision. That's the goal. Eternal and perpetual unity with the divine. That's the goal. So to the question, is the endeavor still worth it? It depends on what your goal is. If your goal is sanctification and holiness, I hate to say it, but like systematic, formulaic theology, if it's not serving towards our salvation, towards our sanctification and holiness, it is no good. And just as Bonnefoy says, if the trend, like, even though he is ascribing the symptom of this hyper-Thomism to the 100 years after Aquinas's death, make no mistake, this quote, this affirmation willy-nilly that the theologian can and must demonstrate, to the strictest sense of the word, authentic mysteries as a geometer, demonstrates his theorems. And what's really sad is throughout these volumes, many of the authors, even the authors that pen rather fruitful essays of theology that have borne fruit for me, they use a lexicon. They use these words that are almost exactly attributable to a materialistic, hyper-rational mentality. They use words like system, formula, and it gives off an air of, not irreverence isn't quite the right term. It's almost as if Valentin Tomberg, in his Meditations on the Tarot, talks about this problem that scientists get themselves into, and he even uses some quotations from Papou and Peladon and others to demonstrate how the scientific mind tends to end up at the same place an occultist does. That through their theorems, through their formulas, that they're able to obtain, that they're able to finally grasp what it is that they're seeking. It's this will to power. It's the spirit of the Übermensch. And so I would say the impulse behind this hyper-Thomism, hyper-scholasticism, it's like a crypto-Nietzscheanism. It's this will to power that's purely Luciferic in nature. It's this will to power that seeks to grasp. It seeks to grasp, to hold, to handle. And unfortunately, I would say that contemporary theology today suffers from it. And part of it has to do with the fact that we all suffer from modernity. Because modernity exacerbates all the Luciferic impulses in man. And so let's see. Let's see, Basilius, you also bring up another question. Is this spirit of logic extreme to the point to be autistic or hyper-focused? It can be. It can be. And one easy, unfortunately, a low-fruit example of that would be the sede vacantist. Your stereotypical sede vacantist, they are they fall into that paradigm, and look where it's gotten them. It has them separated. It has them separated from reality. It has them separated from the it has them separated from the church. And the way in which that they cope with that fact is by claiming that in reality they are the real church, when they still have as of yet been able to actually demonstrate, to truly actually demonstrate it in a substantial manner in which first principles are maintained based on how I currently understand it, which may change. I'm open to learn new things. And also, Basilius, you ask faith by logos. When I referred to the issue of faith by reason. So here's where we get into an issue of semantics, because the Greek word logos, it means more than just simply logic. Formulaic logic that we have the ability to practice is not necessarily an indication that everything is pure reason, that everything operates under pure reason. We know that reason alone is not sufficient. It's not sufficient, because there are mysteries. By the existence of Catholic mysteries in and of themselves, the mystery of the transubstantiation, like, you can attempt to explain it, but at the end of the day, it's still a mystery. You can't fully apprehend it. When I say the mistake in this hypertomism, hyperscholasticism, is faith by human reason. It's faith by human reason that happens to include Scripture. It happens to include recorded revelation. So no, it's faith by logos, not as in faith by Christ. Obviously, by Christ we have access to grace because of a sacrifice and so on and so forth. But logos does not strictly mean human reason, human rationality. So, so no, the faith does not come to us by our own intellect, by our own will, by our own exercise of human reason. It comes to us from beyond. It's a supernatural virtue, not a natural virtue. God is super rational. All right. So if we go back to the analogy that I drew from my medical background, so you have a plane. All right. You have the middle of the plane. The middle is the rational, temperate, and prudent mean of anything. But in this case, we're talking about rationality. So reason. Okay. So you have true human reason is prudent and temperate. or I should say, prudence and temperance allows you to get to the mean, which is true, pure human reason. Then you have the two extremes. You have hypo-rational. You have a deficiency, or you have an excess. And I would imagine that the deficiency of reason would just be consequences of ignorance, consequences of lack of learning, lack of literacy, lack of there are always, just like with hypotension, there's many contributing factors that lead to hypotension. All right. Now, an excess of rationality, I would say, you reach the point of excess predominantly because of original sin, and secondarily because of pride. Because to take pride in human reason would tend to lead one to hyper-rationality. Covetousness can contribute to this as well as gluttony. Maybe not gluttony, but like, I guess covetousness is better. Curiosity plays into this as well, into the excess of human reason. And we see this with the Greek philosophers. We see this with any philosopher. They always have an excess, and regardless of whether they ascribe to word games like the sophists, or whether they ascribe to strict categories like Aristotle, or whether they hearken to a tradition, which you see oftentimes with Platonists and Neoplatonists. But notice what they all have in common. What they have in common is that they don't have the truth. They don't actually have the truth. To be excessive in human reason or deficient means you don't have access to truth. Who is a person? That person being Jesus Christ. He had to reveal himself to us. And the only way that he was able to reveal himself was to incarnate. The incarnation, redemption, incarnation, sacrifice, and redemption all were required in order to free us from this plane of human reason, to also illumine it, to try to elevate it. But in order to be elevated to it, you have to remain at the mean before you can begin to ascend. And so, again, taking this plane with the two extremes and the mean, and there were pagan philosophers who did their best to kind of remain close to the mean, right? But where's God's rationality? There's true human reason. True human reason exists at the mean on this plane. But it's not enough. It's human reason. It's qualified. And because it's qualified, it's not pure. It's qualified as human reason, and therefore, because it's human reason, it suffers from all the things that humans suffer from the effects of, which is original sin. Above that, beyond that, super reason, supernatural reason. Well, not supernatural reason, super reason, superatio. That is the degree of rationality possessed by God. And he imparts it to us by grace. Through revelation, tradition, gifts of the Holy Spirit. And we only have access to it through the sacraments. By being grafted onto the body of Christ, who is that superatio, logos. Again, logos, like even limiting it to superatio is not necessarily correct. That's just more, that's just me using my human reason to try to catch a glimpse of the actual truth of it. But logos itself is not exactly synonymous with reason, with logic. We use the word logos as the etymological root for the word logic, but that's where the similarities end. We have to be careful not to, like, Greek is a very fascinating language, and it's not a language to be taken lightly. Latin has precision, and this is the other thing too. Like, I'm not bashing Latin, but the virtue of Latin is its precision. And unfortunately, because of its precision, it lent that characteristic into what fed the growth of hyper-Thomism. So to move on, we'll look at a few other chats here. Jacobite Wiseman, thank you for making it back on. Jacobite says, most beautiful things are hidden gold, jewels, money, silver. Right, it's hidden there. I think I get your meaning, specifically in the hidden part of that. It's when you find it. But then again, the question is it you finding it, or is it being revealed to you? And then the joy of the revelation. Basilius Basil follows up saying, the point of understanding reality is to align yourself with what is real. You should make decisions based on what is real. Well, ultimately, so, and this is where we get into the issues present in discussions about, well, what is reality? Because on the one hand, you have your quantum physicists, your quantum theoretical physicists who have made a huge muck of things, quite frankly. I would say they have done more of the devil's work than any other generation before them. They've caused nothing but confusion, and their theories are just outlandish. And it's like, oh, but the math works. And see, and this is where we get into the issue of hyper-rationalism. Hyper-rationalism leads to absurdity. Now, things like Schrodinger's cat, the basic underlying principle of Schrodinger's cat definitely is alluding to something that is real. Mainly because I actually came across Schrodinger's cat reading Saint Albert the Great. So his Speculum Astronomiae, towards the end, he has a passage where he basically, in the medieval period, he lays out Schrodinger's cat. Centuries before Schrödinger even walked the earth. And I read it, and I sat, and I like, when I read it, I sat there. It was just absolutely, I was gobsmacked. In fact, I'll pull it up. Pull it up so that you don't have to take my word for it, because I made sure that I touched on it. Let's see here. Come on. So sorry. This is one of the things we have to deal with when we go with more casual side of things. Here we go. Here it is. All right. So this is Saint Albert the Great in Speculum Astronomiae, hundreds of years before Schrödinger. Okay, this is before Schrödinger's cat. Quote, "For of the contingent that will happen, and about which it is true to say that it will happen, before it happens, it is always possible both to be and not to be, but when it is, it can no longer not be." End quote. So there are things that science, modern science, has touched on, which fails to acknowledge that it had already been touched on before, because they're just so off chasing their own tail, scribbling equations on a chalkboard, that they forget to look out the damn window. Or how do the kids say it? Like they stopped at a certain point. They stopped touching grass, smelling the air, listening to birds, watching migrations. It had, and look at the end result. The existence of weapons that were beforehand unthinkable. Weapons that the use of which is automatically unjustified by Catholic teaching. And I'm not just talking about Catholic teaching after the Second Vatican Council, even before. If you go off of the principles of just warfare, nuclear weapons don't fit the bill. And so the hyper rationality, this this rejection of mystery. It's a rejection of mystery. And ultimately, all a mystery is simply that which is self-evident to God. It doesn't have to be, there is no requirement that anything has to be self-evident to us here at our level. This was what got the Pharisees into trouble. This is one of the reasons why Jesus was so condemnatory to the against the Pharisees, was because the Pharisees were suffering from this same hyper-rationality. They got so deep into their theological bubble. The shell of their theological bubble solidified to the point that it was impregnable, and they just couldn't see outside of it. And when the crucifixion happened, their bubble burst, and they didn't know what to do, and so they coped, and the cope ended up being the Talmud, and the rest is, as they say, history. And unfortunately, more pertinent today than I think anyone cares to really talk about. But yeah, that's a great example of this hyper rationality, this like the equivalent of hypertomism in Scripture are the Pharisees and the scribes. They were so self-absorbed in their systems and formulae and their theology that they could not account for mystery. They could not account for what we perceive of as mystery. God is all-knowing, all right? We can never be. It's fine to make effort. Like, I don't have any objection to anything Thomas Aquinas says in the first part of the Summa Theologica. All right? Which we can go to here. And right here, question 1, Article 4, whether sacred doctrine theology is a practical science. What does he say? He says, on the contrary, every practical science is concerned with human operations, as moral science is concerned with human acts and architecture with buildings. Sacred doctrine is chiefly concerned with God, whose handiwork is especially man. Therefore, it is not a practical, but a speculative science. It's speculative. Every tot and tittle of theology is speculative. And this is Aquinas even describing his own theology. It's speculative. Why? Because mystery is it's like a fundamental law of Christianity. You cannot get away from mystery. Mystery is, sometimes it seems as if a mystery is contra-rational, that it's against reason. Sometimes miracles seem as if they are against the natural order, when in reality, from the perspective of God, uh, they are super rational and supernatural. Just because something God does seems to be impervious to our systems and formula, which Bonnefoy admits in his essay in Volume 2 of Mariology. You know, there's a risk. There's a tremendous risk when you in Bonnefoy's case, for example, and hopefully he understood this at the time, but the gravity of being a theologian and with every treatise you write and publish, you open yourself up to causing tremendous error. And this is something that I have to wrestle with, given what I do on Substack. If, like, as he admits in his essay on the predestination of Mary, if he admits that all attempts to treat predestination have shown themselves to be flawed in many ways, then obviously a mystery is at play. And it's almost like it's a sign of insanity. You know, insanity what's insanity? It's continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different result. And I would say that this is another facet to hyper-Thomism. You know, you keep quoting these things, like you quote the church fathers, you quote this, you quote that, you quote this, you quote that. It's almost like, and this is why the thumbnail is the way it is, it's almost like theology has become a man-powered large language model. And then you go on to Twitter and all your anonymous Twitter bots that are either groypers or sedevacantists or other trads. And full disclosure, I consider myself at the most trad leaning. You know, I only attend the Latin Mass. I fully support the I'm in support of the SSPX. My family since 2013 has been formed by their example, by their witness, by their charism. I have experienced the fruits of maintaining traditional liturgy as part of my Catholic life, and I am fully on board with the assessment that the Church currently is in a state of crisis and suffers from the errors of modernism. So I'm definitely trad leaning, but there are places where I will disagree with other trads. No need to get into them here, but the point being is that that's just a disclosure and transparency, so that you understand when I say that trads on the internet especially fall into this hyper-Thomism. This hyper-Thomism has the characteristic of an AI chatbot. It's automatically it's sycophantic. It's self-referential. To borrow some imagery from Meditations on the Tarot, chapter 10, the Wheel of Fortune, Tomberg talks about how, like, the symbol of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail, what does it represent? It represents a closing off. Like, you're being closed off from everything else. You're being encircled. It's an enclosure. And Tomberg talks about how science is stuck in this endless loop that they can't get out of. Wolfgang Smith talks about this in a slightly different way, and he refers to it as how science has lost its ontology. It's in search of an ontology that it can't seem to get to, because it has cut itself off. It's cut itself off, and it has enclosed itself in an infinite loop that it can't escape. And some circles online of trad Catholics and modern Catholics and normie Catholics, they all have constructed for themselves their own enclosures that have cut them off from mystery, from the supernatural, from the super rational. And the solution to avoiding becoming the solution is to avoid becoming whatever this is. Mindar. I don't know why they don't have a picture of it here, but so Mindar is this android that was created in Japan, and it's basic. It just, all it does is it recites the Heart Sutra, and then it refers to itself as a bodhisattva. For those of you who understand the significance of that, I mean, how creepy is this? As Canon Bodhisattva, I can transcend time and space and transform into anything. As you can see, I have decided to meet you all in the form of an android. All right, let me find you all a picture of Mindar. This is Mindar. This is a robot preacher. An artificial, it's an AI preacher. All right. You could take all of the Summa Theologica, all the theological writings of all the saints, and you could copy paste them into a large language model, and turn it into something that you can question, and it'll spit you out. And in doing so, you cut it off. You disconnect it and you enclose it, and you subject it to the same impulses and spirit that animates current theological discourse. Hyper-rationalists. You subject it to this hyper-rationalism, which ultimately leads to conclude to one of two conclusions. Well, I mean, it might not only be two, but two that jump out at me. The one is Chardonism, the theology of Teilhard de Chardin, which was condemned. He was condemned. He was censured. And a lot of his writings had their effect on. They do have their effect on the current crisis of the church. I imagine that Father Jimmy Martin is quite fond of Teilhard de Chardin. And then on the other hand, you get atheism, or agnosticism, or you end up in some strange circle of in the stratosphere that is cut off truly from legitimate apostolic succession, and you get stuck in a situation where you were participating in the sacraments that are not licit or valid. So, but yeah, there's no difference between what currently is happening with theology today and what would happen if you took every theological treatise of the Catholic Church, even if you only used pre-conciliar Vatican I, like even if you only used theology up until Vatican I and plugged it into this robot, you would still be cutting it off. You would be creating a context contra the body of Christ against heaven. And at least in Catholicism, especially in traditional Catholicism, we have this issue where it's mistaken, like this hyper reverence for Aristotle. And I figured that I would refer to a passage. Well, actually, no. I don't think that. I don't think this passage necessarily applies. I had it ready to go, kind of on the back burner, but on the second glance, it doesn't seem to bear any weight. But yeah, and you know what's interesting? We already we already have seen an example of this with where they make an AI version of Jesus and they stick it in a confessional. They took a confessional and they put a screen in the veil on the priest's side, and they hooked it up to this AI that had been fed all the gospel, all the sayings attributed to Jesus, and it was made a public display where people could go into this confessional and basically have a conversation about their life in with an AI version of Jesus. And yes, it's even just thinking about it right now is sending my stomach down into a pit. It is deeply disturbing. And yes, you're right. You're right, Basilius. It is an idol. It's an idol. Even if it's even if it's in the image and likeness of Jesus, it would be an idol. Christ established for us what is his actual presence this side of the grave, and it's the Eucharist. He established that himself. But this confessional with the AI Jesus, he did not establish. That was established by man. You're right, it wouldn't even be an icon. It wouldn't even be an icon. There are pretty strict parameters for what is an icon. And I've even heard it by some that an icon cannot even be copy pasted. Like, you can't just print it off and slap the printed version on a piece of wood. That no, it has to be handmade. It has to be made by hand in order for it to actually count as a true icon. With that being said, there have been mercies granted to those who have mass-produced icons, such as the instances of the in Canada. I remember reports of a weeping icon of the Blessed Virgin, and it was weeping myrrh oil for a period of time. But that technically it wasn't a true icon. It was a mass-produced icon. So, but mercies God, and again, even though we have these ideas of what is strictly this or that, such as in the case of an icon, God still shows his mercy through the things that burst that bubble, that help us to break open the enclosure that we've used to cut ourselves off from him, from the context he wants to apply for us to all these things, and especially to our understanding. So, to kind of wrap it up for tonight, let's hopefully walk away with this understanding as follows. There isn't necessarily anything inherently wrong with theology. All right? We have to remember that at the end of the day, as Thomas tells us, it is not a practical science, it is a speculative science. It can bear fruit. It's not to say that it cannot bear fruit, but the thing that has to be remembered is that it is speculative. The only thing that we must ascribe to is that which is dogmatically declared by the Catholic Church. There are things that can be deduced from those, and we certainly can pursue these questions. Pursuing questions in and of itself is not at issue. The issue is when you begin to enclose yourself and you begin to prevent yourself from when you cut yourself off the same way the Pharisees did. That is when you get into trouble. And with the way theology is going today, it presents only a vision of enclosure. The solution, a possible solution, let me see if I can find it for you. So I want to at least be able to show it. Saved. And I am more than happy to plug this. Because I think that it is, I think that it's really important. I think that it's, and this is just a quick example that I can pull up for you all. Liturgical realism. So there's this movement. Some people call it re-enchantment. Other people call it, some people call it disenchantment, depending on the way that you perceive it. So for, some people call it re-enchantment because they feel like modernity has disenchanted the magical, the miraculous, and so on and so forth. The people who prefer the term disenchantment are thinking in terms of that modernity has put us under an enchantment and we need to be disenchanted of modernity. But writers like Ross Arlen Teakin and Javier Velasquez, along with Juni Arneston, I believe is the other one. There's some Catholic and some Orthodox writers on Substack who are treating of it under the term liturgical realism, which I think is the much better term to use, and it helps kind of avoid the semantics between disenchantment and reenchantment, as well as some of the baggage that comes with those two words. But I would encourage you all to get onto Substack to read these pieces. This is just this part 3 of a multi-part series of essays about first principles of liturgical realism, and it kind of it's sort of riffing off of St. Maximus's idea of cosmic liturgy. It's also riffing off of the work by Catherine Pickstock, her book After Writing on the Liturgical Consummation of Philosophy. I haven't read it. My father has, and so he's very much in line with this concept of liturgical realism. Even though he doesn't seem to fully understand this particular term for it. But yeah, this movement, this liturgical realism movement, is in my humble estimation, my hopeful estimation, a possible solution to the issue of the downward spiral of theology today. This is the antidote to hyper-Thomism, hyper-scholasticism, and And this is what's going to be the the mode in which one operates to help maintain the sense of relationship. And that's the other thing that hyper-Thomism has a problem with, is for all the lip service it may give to what the virtues are, what charity is, how we understand charity, and so on and so forth from like systematic scientific approach, doing so rarely renders one feeling that they are in an actual relationship with what it is that they're studying. Yes, in order to love God, we must know God. But the thing is, we can only imperfectly come to know God through reason. God reveals himself. That is what Scripture shows us. God makes himself known to us. We never make him known to us by our own. It's always collaborative. It must remain so. It's not propositional. The faith is not a series of propositions that you just have to intellectually adhere to. That's Protestantism. And in some instances, it's Protestantism mixed with mental illness. So that is not like that. That is not the path to take. Liturgical realism, what it proposes, is the path to take. It is the antidote, and I encourage you all to look into it. Other places that you can find it is reading anything by Sebastian Morello. This one is The World is God's Icon, Creator and Creation in the Platonic Thought of Thomas Aquinas. This book is a great antidote for the hyper-Aristotelianism that is in current day Thomism. And this book goes pretty far to demonstrate that actually Thomas was a Platonist, and he was able to adopt and successfully use Aristotle's lexicon in order to demonstrate Platonic truth, and Aquinas actually spends more time quoting St. Augustine and Pseudo-Dionysius than he does Aristotle. And both Augustine and Pseudo-D are Platonists, not Aristotelians. Sebastian also has another book, Mysticism, Magic, and Monasteries, which is sort of just like a survey of where we're at in terms of mystagogy. The church is also, part of the reason the church is suffering a crisis, he surmises, has to do with the fact that she is missing a mystagogy that she had, and that she seems to have lost. He doesn't pin it down to any particular time period, but I wager that it began with the Counter-Reformation and eventually reached its apex under Leo XIII's endorsement of Aquinas as Thomism being the universal theology of the Catholic Church. Other places you can kind of dip your toes in. Wolfgang Smith is really good. Oh, sorry, Sebastian Morello. I'll bring it up. Sebastian Morello. He was a contributor at the European Conservative. He has a wonderful documentary series called Symposia over there. He's also featured on a channel called The New Humanum, where he has this phenomenal discussion with a traditional artist in England. last year there was a little bit of a kerfuffle, um, mainly started by a bunch of hyper-Thomists, such as what's his name, Matthew Menard. Um, Matthew Menard and a few others took issue with Morello's most recent with Morello's Magic Mysticisms and Monastery book, where they tried to argue that he was advocating for the practice of sorcery, which I want to know where the flying F that they got that idea, having read the book myself. No, Aristotle's not a Platonist. Actually, Aristotle had a lot of he had a lot of disagreements with some of the Platonic doctrines, um, and that was part and parcel of one of the things Aquinas sought out to do, was to try to reconcile the two. But but clearly, even Aquinas was not capable of reconciling them perfectly, because even after Aquinas, we had many other attempts that were made, most especially in the Renaissance, when the actual full and complete texts of Aristotle and Aquinas became available. In Aquinas's time, there were only commentaries of commentaries of commentaries, which is just a medieval version of a large language model. A commentary of a commentary of a commentary is basically you're playing telephone, where you have Aristotle on one end and you have Thomas Aquinas on the other, and not all of the commentaries were accurate. And so the Renaissance came, and we finally did have the actual texts that we could then read and study. And so it renewed the attempt to present the reconciliation between Aristotle and Plato. And one such figure that made the attempt was Pico della Mirandola. Unfortunately, he was a bit overly zealous and a bit too theatrical and bombastic for his own good, that it landed him house arrest because of the Inquisition. And so I think he's worth looking into still, because despite the nature of how he approached disseminating his ideas, was incorrect and not prudent or appropriate. I do believe there are fruits that can be had if one is careful. So yeah, we just I think there's still room to be made. There's still headway to be had, paths to tread. And honestly, I don't believe that we will ever truly reach a final reconciliation between Plato and Aristotle until we make it into the next life. So I don't think that it's possible in this life, because again, God is super rational, and he acts supernaturally, and that which is super rational and supernatural does not make sense to us, and seems to contradict the natural order when it doesn't in reality. And all reality is, like, truly, reality at the end of the day is whatever God says it is. Reality is whatever God says it is, and because God is super rational, we are never going to fully understand. We're never going to fully understand reality except that which we have received by God. And that's why scripture and tradition are so important. It's why Christ established the church. And so in order to adhere to reality, we need to adhere to the bride of Christ. We need to graft ourselves onto the mystical body of our Lord and Savior, because what other way is there? So, Silver Bullet, sorry, sorry you're jumping in at the end. Feel free to rewind it back. I actually answered the same question. Basilius asked it a little earlier in stream. So I hope you catch the VOD. I hope you enjoy it. Real quick, last round of housekeeping. Aside from, here, one sec. There we go. All right. So if you want to support, well, this live stream, everything that I do on the internet is viewer supported. So if you want to support me for free, you can just like, share, subscribe to this YouTube channel and to my Substack. It's free to do so. And it really does great. Help us to get to 1,000 subscribers. And if we can get to 1,000, I will do an AMA. I'm actually really excited about the prospect of doing an AMA. The other way that you can support the channel is through Buy Me a Coffee. This is what the website looks like. But yeah, this is like the tip jar. If you think that what I'm doing is important enough, and if you want to help, contribute to funding my acquisition of source material, everything that you see behind me. So far, I have bought with my own hard-earned cash, but I'm not able to continue to acquire the source material at the rate that I once did on my own, and combined with medical bills and the necessities of life, it would be a great help if anybody is feeling charitable to please help support our efforts at this channel by contributing either at Buy Me a Coffee, or you can go over to the Sophiergist, which is my Substack publication. This is this here is the most recent essay, part 2 of my Wondrous Works of Wisdom essay series. You can also see part 1's right there. You can read all of the essays for free with a free subscription. It also puts you on the email list. But if you're feeling so generous and you are able to do so, if you're able to contribute on a monthly or annual basis, there is a paid tier on the Substack. It gives you access to audio versions of all the essays. They are not narrated by a robot. They are narrated by yours truly. I so far have one of my essays uploaded. There will be more recordings coming soon, as well as I'm toying with the idea of maybe doing an annual physical printed edition of all my essays from the year. I think that would be really cool to do for you all. And it's also better to read on paper anyhow, so it's better for your eyes. But yeah, if you want access to the audio versions of all the essays, a paid tier monthly or annual subscription gets you that. But if you want to be my Cosimo di Medici, if you want to be the Cosimo di Medici to my Marsilio Ficino, you can join at the Societas Sophiergica. It's the founders tier. For $150 a year, you get access to the audio versions and to the eventual annual printed editions of essays, as well as the ability to have physical hand or typewritten correspondence with myself about all of the various subjects that we talk about on the Substack and here at the YouTube channel. So if this is of any interest to you, these are all the ways in which you can support me. It's okay if you can only do the free. It's no big deal. I do all of this with the expectation that I'm not doing it for money. I don't anticipate ever making money from anything that I'm doing here. But for those who do feel called to be generous or charitable for whatever reason, the options are there for you. So with that, my dear unknown friends, we will conclude with a prayer, and I will see you all next week. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Thank you all so much, my dear unknown friends. God bless.